In the winter of 2014, a 29-year-old founder in Manhattan worked 19 hours a day and still couldn't pay himself properly. He answered every email, took every call, fixed every client problem himself. 3 months later, that same man closed the biggest deal of his life, not because he worked harder, but because an older billionaire taught him one uncomfortable truth. Hard work can build skill, but by itself, it almost never builds wealth. And once you understand the psychology behind that, you stop looking at work the same way forever. His name was Ethan Cole. At 29, Ethan had what most people would call ambition. He had built a small branding agency from his one-bedroom apartment. No investors, no family money, no shortcuts, just relentless effort. For 3 years, he lived the same routine. Up at 5:30, client calls by 7, revisions all afternoon, sales calls in the evening, proposals at night, panic after midnight. He wasn't lazy. If anything, he was the hardest working person in every room he entered. And that was exactly the problem. Because the harder Ethan worked, the more his business depended on him. If a client needed reassurance, Ethan handled it. If a designer missed a deadline, Ethan stepped in. If a prospect hesitated, Ethan jumped on another call. If something broke, Ethan became the emergency system. From the outside, it looked admirable. From the inside, it was slow financial suffocation. His revenue looked decent on paper, but his profit was thin. His stress was permanent. And worst of all, the more exhausted he became, the more proud he felt of his exhaustion. It made him feel serious, necessary, important. That's the trap no one talks about. One Thursday night, after losing a client he had worked 7 months to keep, Ethan walked into a quiet diner on 48th Street just after 1 a.m. He sat down in the corner booth, loosened his tie, stared at the table, and whispered the sentence struggling people have been whispering for generations. "I just need to work harder." That was when the man in the booth behind him looked up. The man was in his late 60s, gray suit, silver hair, the kind of stillness money gives a person when they no longer need to prove anything. He turned slightly toward Ethan and said, almost casually, "Arthur Blake, no, that's probably the one thing that will keep you poor." Ethan looked up, irritated more than curious. "Ethan, excuse me." The older man gave a faint smile. "Arthur Blake, you don't have a work problem. You have a wealth psychology problem." Ethan almost laughed. He had heard enough motivational nonsense to last a lifetime. But there was something unsettling about the way the man said it. No hype, no performance, just certainty. "Ethan, you don't know anything about me." "Arthur Blake, I know enough. You're tired. You're carrying too much. Your business depends on your presence. And somewhere deep down, you think that's noble." Ethan said nothing, because every word was true. The waitress topped up their coffee. Arthur didn't ask for permission to stay. He simply sat there like a man who had learned long ago that the truth earns its own seat. "Arthur Blake, tell me something. If you disappeared for 30 days, would your business grow, survive, or collapse?" Ethan leaned back. That question landed harder than he expected, because he knew the answer instantly. It would collapse. Arthur nodded as if he had heard it anyway. "Arthur Blake, then you don't own a business. You own a stressful job with overhead." Ethan crossed his arms. "Ethan, so what? You're saying hard work doesn't matter?" Arthur shook his head. "Arthur Blake, hard work matters in the beginning. It builds competence, discipline, stamina. But wealth is not a prize for effort. Wealth is a reward for leverage." He let the silence do some of the work. Then he continued, "Arthur Blake, most people are conditioned from childhood to believe effort and reward move together. Study hard, get the grade. Work hard, get the approval. Stay late, earn respect. That logic works in school. It works in employment. But in business and wealth creation, it breaks." Ethan frowned. Arthur picked up a spoon and turned it slowly between his fingers. "Arthur Blake, do you know why people admire hard workers so much?" "Ethan, because it's respectable." "Arthur Blake, because effort is visible. And human beings are easily impressed by what they can see." He leaned forward slightly. "Arthur Blake, a man carrying boxes looks productive. A founder answering emails at midnight looks committed. A business owner rushing from crisis to crisis looks important. But the market doesn't pay you for visible suffering. It pays you for valuable outcomes that can scale." Ethan looked down at his coffee. Arthur's voice remained calm. "Arthur Blake, poor and middle-income people often build identity around being needed. Wealthy people build systems around not being needed for every little thing." That sentence sat between them like a mirror, because Ethan suddenly saw his own life clearly. He didn't just work hard because the business required it. He worked hard because it made him feel in control. It made him feel worthy. It made him feel like success was morally guaranteed as long as the sacrifice was big enough. Arthur watched the realization spread across Ethan's face. "Arthur Blake, hard work feels safe. That's the psychology of it. It gives you a direct action, a simple answer. Work more, sleep less, push harder. It protects you from asking the frightening questions." "Ethan, like what?" Arthur's eyes sharpened. "Arthur Blake, like whether the business model is wrong, whether the offer is weak, whether the client type is draining you, whether you're selling hours instead of selling transformation, whether you've confused motion with progress." Ethan looked away, because that was exactly what he had done. He had built a company around his own availability. He charged based on deliverables, revised endlessly, took smaller clients because he feared saying no, and secretly believed that being overwhelmed meant he was getting closer to wealth. Arthur sat back. "Arthur Blake, let me tell you something most people never recover from hearing. The market has no emotional relationship with your effort." He paused. "Arthur Blake, it doesn't care how tired you are. It doesn't care how sincere you are. It doesn't care that you've been grinding for 3 years. It pays for clarity. It pays for positioning. It pays for trust. It pays for systems. It pays for ownership." Then Arthur gave Ethan Ethan the line he would remember for the rest of his life. Arthur Blake. The people who become wealthy are not usually the people doing the most work. They are the people who structure value in a way that keeps paying after the work is done. Ethan sat completely still. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about tomorrow's tasks. He was thinking about the architecture of his entire life. Ethan, so what am I supposed to do? Arthur answered immediately. Arthur Blake, stop asking, how can I work more? Start asking, how can value be created without my constant presence? Then he broke it down, not like a lecturer, like a man handing another man a key. Arthur Blake, raise your positioning, narrow your offer, stop serving everyone, productize what you solve best, build a process others can repeat, price for outcomes, not for hours, and remove yourself from work that feels urgent but creates no asset. Ethan swallowed. It sounded simple. It also sounded terrifying, because it meant giving up the one thing he had always trusted. More effort. Arthur could see the fear. Arthur Blake, that fear is normal. Your mind has been trained to associate labor with safety, but wealth requires a different identity. You must stop being the engine and start being the architect. The next morning, Ethan did something that felt almost reckless. He stopped trying to save everything. He looked at his business honestly. Most of his clients were small, demanding, low margin, and addicted to endless revisions. They praised his hustle while quietly draining his future. So he made changes. Painful ones. He cut half his service list. He dropped his cheapest clients. He stopped selling branding support and built one focused premium offer, a high-ticket brand positioning system for B2B founders preparing to raise prices or attract larger clients. For the first month, it felt like a mistake. Revenue dipped. 2 clients left. One prospect told him his new pricing was unreasonable. And for a few nights, Ethan almost went back to the old life. Back to being busy. Back to being available. Back to confusing exhaustion with progress. But then something shifted. A software founder booked a strategy call. Instead of pitching endless hours and custom work, Ethan walked him through a clear process with clear outcomes. No chaos. No desperation. No over-explaining. Just certainty. The client signed that week. Then another came in through referral. Then another. Because Ethan's business was no longer selling effort. It was selling clarity. Within 4 months, he hired a project lead, standardized delivery, built templates, reduced revisions, turned his expertise into a system others could help execute. And 3 months after that late-night diner conversation, he closed the largest deal of his life, a $280,000 annual contract. Not after increasing his workload, after reducing it. He was finally working fewer hours than before, but producing more value than ever. That was the moment he understood what Arthur had been trying to teach him. Hard work had made him capable, but leverage made him valuable. And value structured correctly is what creates wealth. 6 months later, Ethan was earning more than he ever had. But that wasn't the real transformation. The real transformation was psychological. He no longer needed to feel exhausted to feel important. He no longer mistook stress for significance. He no longer worshipped effort simply because it was difficult. And that is the part most people never understand. Hard work is honorable, but wealth is not created by honor alone. Wealth is created when effort turns into an asset, when skill turns into a system, when value turns into leverage, when your income stops depending entirely on your personal strength. Arthur Blake had said it best. If your business only works when you are tired, then what you built is not wealth, it's dependency. So here's the question worth asking yourself. Are you building something that rewards your exhaustion, or something that keeps creating value even when you step away? Because the people who stay trapped usually work harder every year, and the people who become wealthy usually learn at some point to stop selling their effort and start designing leverage. If this story changed the way you think about work, business, or success, subscribe. Because on this channel, we don't chase empty motivation. We break down the psychology behind extraordinary wealth, power, and transformation.